This is ours now. You're still welcome to visit, of course, if you call ahead. That's what my daughter said to me the night before I was supposed to move into my new home. My first home. The only thing I'd ever truly bought for myself, with no compromises. I stood on the front porch with a set of grocery bags in my hands, watching my own family lounging on the sofa I hadn't even unwrapped yet. Abigail's tone was light, almost cheerful, as if she were making some polite suggestion about seating arrangements at brunch. I looked at her, then at Greg, her husband, who didn't bother standing up. He raised a beer in my direction with a casual grin. "Hope you don't mind, Mom. It just makes sense." Makes sense. I'd spent the last 40 years making sense of things for everyone else. Making peace, making do, making space. When Abigail's marriage nearly fell apart 3 years ago, I welcomed her and the kids into my tiny bungalow without blinking. When they stayed longer than expected, I adjusted. When Greg came back and moved in, I swallowed my discomfort. I always did. But this was supposed to be different. 2 months ago, I sold my old house. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Added my retirement savings, the little insurance money left from Harold's passing, and a modest inheritance from my sister May. I didn't tell Abigail the full sum. I'd learned. I searched listings for 6 weeks until I found the one. A pale yellow 2-bedroom cottage right on the lake. Quiet, modest, with a screened porch and an old fig tree in the back. Just enough. More than enough for someone like me. And now they were here, unpacked and relaxed, before I'd even moved in. "I thought I'd come early," I said slowly, placing the bags on the hallway bench. "Get the kitchen settled." Greg chuckled. "Yeah, Abigail figured we could help with that. Make the transition smoother." The transition? "The kids already picked their rooms," Abigail added. "We didn't want to wait until school starts to move districts. It just made sense." There it was again, that phrase, like a code word for things decided behind my back. "You understand, right, Mom?" she asked, her head tilted in that practiced expression of concern. "It's not like you need a whole house to yourself." I didn't answer. I walked past them into the kitchen, unlit and half unpacked. The grocery bags suddenly felt foolish. Who brings housewarming snacks to a house already taken? In the dining room, I saw a new placemat with Greg's initials. Abigail's yoga mat draped over the stair rail. A phone charger plugged into the wall I'd planned to paint. Small details, but they told the truth. They weren't helping. They had moved in. I drove back to my rental that night in silence, the air in the car heavier than usual. I passed the bakery that always overcharges for scones, the hardware store where Harold used to waste whole weekends pretending to need parts. I'd lived in this town for 52 years. It had never felt so unfamiliar. When I got home, I didn't turn on the light. I sat at the kitchen table, shoes still on, and stared at the envelope I'd been carrying in my purse for weeks. The deed to the Waterfront villa, signed and sealed. In my name. Just mine. I remembered the day I'd signed it. The notary smiled, said, "Congratulations, Ms. Grayson. A beautiful choice for retirement." I'd smiled back. I had imagined that evening. The windows open, a breeze off the lake, tea on the porch, Harold's photo by the fireplace. I'd imagined peace, privacy, maybe even joy. Instead, I was 78 and sitting in a dark kitchen, unwelcome in my own home. I made a cup of tea with a shaking hand. Halfway through, I poured it out. Somewhere deep down, something began to stir. Not anger, not yet. But something older, quieter. A voice I hadn't listened to in decades. Enough. I stood up and went to the drawer where I kept my files. Mortgage papers, account balances, the contact card from the lawyer Harold had used when we drafted our wills. I pulled it out and stared at it. If they thought I was going to let this happen, quietly, conveniently, they didn't know me at all. Let them think I'm soft. Let them think I'll give in, like I always have. Tomorrow, I'll remind them whose name is on the door. I wasn't always someone who let things go. That came later, after Harold died, after Abigail's first child, after I learned that silence was the only language anyone in my family seemed willing to hear. But once, a long time ago, I had a voice, and I used it. I was 23 when Harold and I bought our first house. A crooked little place with peeling paint and a fireplace that didn't work. We fixed it up ourselves, evenings and weekends, scraping and sanding and saving. I used to run a small tutoring group out of the dining room. He worked construction. There was never much money, but we were happy. Abigail was born 3 years later. I stopped tutoring and started watching over her full time. We didn't call it sacrificing back then. We just did what needed to be done. Over time, that became a habit. Harold passed just after his 60th birthday, quietly, in his sleep. A heart that had given too much for too long. Abigail was 35 then, already married to Greg, already living 2 towns over with 2 toddlers and a new mortgage. I didn't cry at the funeral. Not because I wasn't broken, I was. But because I didn't feel I had the right to fall apart. Everyone leaned on me, even then, and I let them. That same year, Greg lost his job. Abigail called, crying, "We're drowning, Mom. We don't know what to do." I opened my home. They moved in, just for a few months. It turned into nearly 2 years. They eventually moved out, into a place I helped them finance. Then came the private school tuition, the car payments, the orthodontist, the just this once requests that never stopped. I never said no. Not really. I wanted to be needed. I told myself that was love, but it wasn't. It was fear. Fear of being left behind, forgotten. Like so many other women I'd seen, giving everything until they had nothing, not even the dignity of recognition. Now I had this house, my house, and I had a choice to make. The next morning, I called a locksmith, told him the situation, not in full detail, but enough. He offered to come by that afternoon. I called Abigail afterward. Straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. There was nothing to explain. By noon, I was standing on the sidewalk outside my own house. Or rather, the house I had paid for, dreamed of, claimed, watching as Greg carried a box of tools into the garage. I waited until he noticed me. He raised a hand. "Hey, Martha. Didn't expect you back so soon." "It's not back, Greg," I said calmly. "I haven't moved in yet." He blinked at that, unsure how to respond. "Right. Well, we just figured we'd get settled and help smooth things out." I nodded slowly. "You keep saying that. Smooth things out. What does that mean exactly?" Greg scratched the back of his neck. "Look, Martha, I get it. You feel blindsided. But you have to admit it makes more sense this way. We're a family. Families share. I've shared for 40 years. He gave a nervous laugh. "And we've always appreciated it." "No," I said. "You've taken it. That's not the same thing." Just then, the locksmith pulled up. Young man, maybe in his 30s, stepped out of the van, polite and professional. "Ms. Grayson?" "That's me," I said, eyes still on Greg. "What's going on?" Greg asked, his voice sharpening. "I'm having the locks changed." "You can't do that." "I already have," I replied, handing the locksmith the paperwork. "It's my house." Greg stepped closer, his voice low. "You're going to embarrass Abigail like this? In front of the kids?" "You already did that," I said, "when you moved in without asking." He opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. The locksmith, sensing the tension, kept his head down and got to work. 20 minutes later, Greg was on the porch, arms crossed, fuming. Abigail had arrived midway through the process, barely speaking to me. She whispered furiously to Greg, gestured toward me with wide eyes, but never said a word directly. The kids stayed in the car. When the last lock clicked, I turned to both of them. "You have until 6 p.m. to remove your things. After that, anything left is mine to deal with." "You wouldn't dare," Abigail said finally. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a woman who had spent her life expecting to be accommodated, who thought love meant automatic forgiveness, who never once, in all the years I helped her, asked what I needed in return. "I would," I said, and then I walked into my house, alone, and closed the door behind me. The silence inside the house was thicker than I expected. Not the kind of silence you get late at night, or when you're reading a book and the world outside disappears. No, this was the silence that follows noise. The kind that clings to the walls after shouting, after the storm has passed, but left something behind. The furniture was still here, mine, though most of it had been shifted. The living room rug I bought in cash, after weeks of searching, was bunched up under their coffee table. The guest room I had intended as a small sewing space had Greg's shirts hanging in the closet. They hadn't even taken off the tags. I moved slowly through each room, restoring order, resetting the space. Not cleaning, not yet, but reclaiming. The kids' backpacks were still by the hallway bench. One had a juice box inside, half drunk and leaking. The other had a picture of a beach house drawn in crayon. 4 stick figures on the porch, a dog in the yard. Underneath, in Abigail's youngest's handwriting, "Our new home." I sat on the edge of the bench and stared at it for a long time. They really thought it was theirs. Not even through malice. That's what chilled me. There was no great scheme, no forged document, no violent argument. Just assumption. Just years of taking and me letting them. They thought the pattern would continue because it always had. That I would yield, adjust. After all, what kind of mother kicks her daughter out? That's how they'd spin it. I could already hear the conversation Abigail would have with her friends. She just snapped, after everything we've done for her. As if what they'd done was kindness, not debt. I took the drawing and folded it carefully, placing it in a drawer. Not out of sentiment, but as a reminder. People will build whole futures on top of your silence, until you make noise. At 5:42 p.m., the doorbell rang. Abigail stood on the porch, her face pinched with practiced calm. "We're taking the essentials now," she said. "The rest can be picked up tomorrow. I assume that's acceptable?" "No," I said. Her eyes widened. "Excuse me?" "You'll take everything by 6 o'clock. That's what I said." "You have 18 minutes. She looked over her shoulder at Greg, who was standing by the car with the trunk open, arms crossed, then back at me. "Do you even hear yourself, Mother?" "All the time now," I said. "You should try it." She didn't answer, just turned and marched back down the steps. I closed the door again. They made 2 trips in and out, silent, not looking at me. The kids stayed in the car, watching an iPad. I wondered if they even understood what was happening, or if one day, years from now, they'd remember this as the day Grandma got strange. That was fine. Let them forget me, as long as they remembered this. You can't take something that doesn't belong to you, no matter how long you've been allowed to borrow it. At 6:05 p.m., the car pulled away. The house was mine again. It didn't feel like victory. I walked into the kitchen, turned on the kettle, and realized I had no tea. They'd taken my tin. I laughed, not bitterly, just softly, at the absurdity of it all. They took the good mugs, too, left the chipped ones, the ones I used to use when they weren't visiting. I stood in front of the open cabinet for a long time, thinking. There were things to do, emails to check, boxes to unpack. But instead, I picked up my keys and went for a walk. The neighborhood was still new to me. Most houses had tidy porches and wind chimes, garden gnomes or little flags. I saw two women chatting across hedges, one watering plants, another putting away groceries. Normal life, undisturbed. The lake shimmered at the end of the block, catching the last of the afternoon light. I walked toward it, hands in my pockets, not entirely sure what I was feeling. Not peace. Not yet. But something close. Tomorrow, I'd call my lawyer, confirm the deed, update my will, make sure there were no gaps they could wiggle through. But tonight, just tonight, I would sit by the water and watch the light fade. No one would call. No one would ask for money. No one would need anything from me. For the first time in decades, I was just a woman, sitting, breathing, owning something. And that, I decided, was a start. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, not from habit, not anymore, but because my body had decided I shouldn't sleep past 5. That's how it is at this age. You don't rest. You simply reset. I made coffee in a borrowed French press. One of the few things Greg hadn't taken, though I doubted it was kindness. He probably just forgot it wasn't his. There was a silence to the house now that didn't feel heavy. It felt right. Earned. The kind of silence I hadn't known in years. Not since Harold died. Not since Abigail's chaos took over every room I tried to keep quiet. I sat at the table with a pen and a yellow legal pad. What I need to do, I wrote. Lawyer locks, already done. Utilities, check names. Will, revisit. Letter to bank, remove Abigail as authorized user. Grocery list. T somewhere between will and grocery list. I started crying. Quietly. Not a sob. Just the kind of cry that sneaks up on you like a visitor you thought had forgotten your address. I didn't wipe the tears away right away. Let them fall. Let them dry. By 8, I had called Mr. Lewiston, Harold's old lawyer. He still worked out of the same downtown office, still answered his own phone. Ms. Grayson, he said warmly, I haven't heard from you since the year we filed the estate. How's life treating you? Life, I said, is suddenly a lot more interesting. I told him everything. Not in dramatic terms, just facts. He asked questions, took notes. You've already had the locks changed? He asked. Yes. Good. And the deed is in your name, alone? It is. Then you're well within your rights. But I'll make sure nothing was signed over, even accidentally. Sometimes families use charm the way others use crowbars. I smiled at that. You've met mine, then. He laughed. We scheduled an in-person appointment for Thursday. I hung up, feeling something settle in my chest. A small weight of certainty. I didn't want to fight, but I wanted to make sure they couldn't pick one and win. After the call, I changed into slacks and my oldest cardigan. I went down to the corner cafe and ordered tea and a blueberry muffin. A small indulgence. I sat by the window, pretending to read, but really just watching the street. A woman came in, maybe 10 years younger than me, in a linen coat and thick scarf, even though it was warm. She had the look of someone who used to wear heels every day, but now leaned on orthopedic soles. She caught my eye and gave a small, polite nod. I smiled back. That's how it begins, sometimes. A nod, a glance, a new page. After lunch, I stopped by the police department. Not to file a complaint, but to log the incident. Quietly. Officially. Just in case. The young officer at the desk listened politely as I explained. Not trying to press charges, I said, but I wanted on record that they entered without my permission, in case they try to claim residency. Smart, he said, taking down the details. People assume family doesn't count for stuff like that. But it does. Boundaries are boundaries. He looked barely 30, but I appreciated his words more than I expected. By the time I returned home, the sun had shifted to the west. The light hit the lake just right, gold and blue in the soft green of late spring. I sat on the porch, sipping the tea I'd finally restocked, and watched ducks float past like they had nowhere urgent to be. That's when I saw Abigail's car. She didn't park, just pulled up, paused, and stared at the house. I stayed seated. Let her look. Maybe she was hoping I'd come out. I didn't. After 2 minutes, she drove away. I knew what would come next. The messages, the guilt, the gentle insinuations. I'd embarrassed her. I'd gone too far. I'd ruined the family. I was ready. That night, I opened the drawer in my desk where I kept old things. Pictures, letters, the check stub from the down payment I'd written for Abigail and Greg's first house, $35,000. I remembered it like it was yesterday. You're investing in our future, Greg had said. They sold that house 6 years later, took the profit and bought a bigger one. I never saw a penny back. I found more stubs, private school tuition, summer camps, Abigail's emergency dental work, a loan for Greg's business that never got off the ground, over $100,000 across 25 years. No contracts, no promises, just trust. I didn't regret the money. I regretted the silence that followed. They never said thank you. Not really. They just assumed. I put everything back in the drawer and closed it. Tomorrow, I'd start a new file, one with only my name on it. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was worried. That part had faded. But because I couldn't stop thinking. Thoughts moved through me like slow thunder. Steady, deep, unrelenting. I lay in bed, listening to the tick of the old mantel clock I'd brought from my previous house. The same clock that sat on our wedding registry all those years ago that Harold insisted on buying even when we couldn't afford it. Some things, he'd said, should last longer than a season. This house was supposed to be that thing for me, my long-awaited seasonless place. Instead, it had become a battlefield. Quiet, for now. But I knew the silence wouldn't last, and I was right. At 7:43 the next morning, my phone rang. I let it buzz twice before picking up. Abigail, I knew it would be. Her voice was controlled, too controlled, the kind that wears perfume to hide the stench. Hi, Mom. Just wanted to check in. Are you okay? I am. A pause. I think we should talk. Face to face. Maybe the 4 of us? Me, Greg, the kids? My grip on the phone tightened. You want to bring the children into this? Well, they're confused. They don't understand why they can't stay in the new house. The new house isn't theirs, I said quietly. It never was. Abigail sighed. Mom, Can you just, please, let's not escalate this. I almost laughed. Escalate? She and Greg had invaded my house like vacationers showing up before check-in, and now wanted to talk about diplomacy. Tomorrow, I said. No kids. Just you and Greg. Fine, she said quickly, like it had been her idea all along. 10 a.m.? 10. I hung up before she could add anything else. For the rest of the day, I prepared. Not just emotionally, practically. I sat at my kitchen table, reviewing my deed again. Read through the law firm's summary from Mr. Lewiston. Sole owner, title clear, no liens, no secondary signatories. Then I found the envelope with every receipt I could pull. Down payments, school tuitions, those handwritten loan notes Greg once scrawled on the back of a grocery list. I lined them up like old battle scars. I wasn't going to use them, not yet. But I needed to see them, to remember, to know that I had not imagined it all. That evening, I cooked, not out of obligation. Just something simple: roast chicken, green beans, cornbread. For the first time in years, I seasoned it exactly how I liked. No allergies to accommodate, no preferences to tiptoe around. I ate alone, watching the lake darken, and I slept well, deeply, without dreams, until the doorbell woke me at 9:59. Greg was in a blazer, trying too hard. Abigail wore her respectable daughter cardigan, the one she usually saved for funerals and school meetings. They didn't wait for me to invite them in. I stood back and let them pass, watched them look around the room like visitors in a museum of their own failed plan. Abigail smiled tightly. Well, it looks very nice. You've done a lot in just a few days. Yes, I said. I've reclaimed what's mine. They sat at the kitchen table without being asked. I remained standing. Mom, Abigail began, we really want to make things right, don't we, Greg? Greg nodded, solemn. Absolutely. This has been a misunderstanding. Tensions were high. We all overreacted. I didn't, I said. Greg faltered. Well, maybe we didn't approach things properly, but we meant well. You moved into my home without asking. We thought you'd be happy, Abigail interrupted. To have us close, to be around the kids. I stared at her. You had already unpacked, claimed bedrooms, changed the Wi-Fi password. She looked away. You said, this is ours now. Do you remember that, Abigail? Silence. I do, I continued. And I want you to hear something from me very clearly. They both looked up. I am done being convenient, done being silent, done being used. You took, and I let you. That's on me. But this house, this one thing, is mine. Not ours. Not shared. Mine. Greg opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. This is not a negotiation. Abigail's face shifted. The mask slipped. So what? You're cutting us off? No, I said. I'm setting a boundary. You may visit if invited. You may call. But I will no longer finance your life or apologize for having my own. Greg scoffed. We've never asked for charity. I stepped to the drawer, pulled out a folder, set it on the table. Take it. Read it. Every check. Every transfer. Every time you needed me. And I showed up. Neither reached for it. That's charity, I said. They left shortly after. No hugs, no parting promises, just silence, the kind that follows truth. The house felt larger after they were gone. The hardest part isn't the confrontation, it's the quiet that comes after. The days that follow are slow and oddly shapeless. You make coffee. You wipe down countertops already clean. You wait for the next ripple, the next act in the drama. But nothing comes. Just quiet. Abigail didn't call. Greg didn't text. No messages. No drop-ins. No excuses or explanations. It would have been easier if they yelled, I think. If they made a scene, called me cruel, accused me of betrayal. At least then I could have pointed to something and said, "There. That's why it had to end." But instead, they left like cowards, carrying their entitlement with them. I spent the next morning calling the utility companies. I wanted everything updated. New passwords, new account holders, no trace of their names anywhere. The woman at the power company asked, "Would you like to add a family member as a backup contact?" "No," I said. "Just me?" She hesitated. "It's recommended in case of emergencies." "I've had enough of those," I said. After that, I went through the mail. 2 envelopes addressed to me, one from the bank, one from a local church I hadn't attended in years, and one addressed to current resident, the kind of envelope realtors send when they think you're just passing through. I nearly threw it away, but opened it anyway. Inside was a glossy brochure for the Neighborhood Homeowners Association. Guidelines, events, points of contact, and a welcome letter. "We're thrilled to have you in Lakeside Glen. If you'd like to be added to the social circle, please email or call. We have monthly potlucks and porch nights and love getting to know our newest neighbors." I stared at the signature. Karen L., HOA President, 102 Sparrow Drive. Something about the name made me smile. Karen L. It sounded like the kind of woman who made cold pasta salad and ran meetings with a timer. The kind of woman Harold would have found unbearable. But I knew her type. I'd taught school for nearly 40 years. I could handle Karen L. I folded the paper and set it aside. Maybe I'd attend the next porch night, maybe not. But I liked knowing I had the choice. That evening, I took a walk by the water. The sun was low, soft orange light spilling across the lake. Kids rode bikes near the curve of the road. A man in a straw hat was fishing. I paused to watch the line twitch. Not because I cared if he caught anything, but because it reminded me of Harold. When I got home, the porch light was on. That was the first time I'd seen it from this angle, glowing like a quiet welcome back after all these years of living for everyone else. I stood on the steps for a moment, hand on the railing. Then I noticed something. The front doormat had been shifted, just slightly. Not enough for most people to care. But I cared. I hadn't stepped on it that way when I left. I opened the door slowly, hand ready to call the police if I had to. But the house was still, intact, except for the dining table. On it sat a plastic bag. Inside, 2 framed photos, a set of keys, and a sticky note. "You forgot these. A." I stared at the note for a long time. The photos were ones I hadn't seen in years. Me and Abigail at her graduation, Harold with the grandkids in the yard. The keys were duplicates of mine, clearly copies they had made without telling me. I opened the door again and walked them out to the trash bin. The keys went in first, then the bag, then the note. The pictures I kept, not because I forgave her, because history deserves to be remembered, even the painful parts. The next morning, I visited Mr. Lewiston's office. He'd prepared a small packet of documents for me, a declaration of ownership, a copy of the deed, a notarized statement clarifying that no cohabitants had been granted legal or informal tenancy. Everything signed, sealed, and simple. "Do you want to press anything further?" he asked gently. "Restraining orders? Written notice?" "No," I said. "She won't come back. Not directly. That part's over." He nodded. "And the will?" "I want to change it." "To exclude her?" "To redirect," I said. I want to create a small fund, educational or personal development, for women over 60, women who gave too much and ended up with too little. His pen stopped. That's specific. I was a teacher, I said. I've seen enough women disappear inside their families. And what about beneficiaries? My granddaughter, I said. The youngest. If she ever needs help, real help, she'll get it. But not if her mother asks for her. He nodded. The papers were printed. I signed them all. By noon, it was done. Legally, financially, emotionally. I had put a wall between myself and the past, not to trap myself inside, but to make sure no one could tear it down again. It started with a knock on the door that wasn't quite a knock. More of a soft tap, the kind you'd use if you weren't sure you were welcome, or didn't want to be caught knocking at all. I was in the kitchen, organizing the spice cabinet, when I heard it. Subtle, hesitant. I opened the front door and found a woman standing there I didn't recognize. Late 30s, well-dressed in a quiet, calculated way. Designer shoes too clean for real use. She carried a folder under one arm and a tablet in the other. "Ms. Grayson?" she asked. "Yes." She smiled with professional restraint. "Hi, I'm Dana Thomas. I represent Willow and Tide Real Estate, and I'm inquiring about the property. I believe there's been some recent family transition?" I stared at her for a moment. "You're a realtor?" "Yes," she said. "Your daughter reached out last week about listing the property. She said the ownership was still being finalized and—" "She said what?" Dana blinked. "That she and her husband had been residing here, but there was a question of legal standing. I was told the situation was amicable and that you might be looking to downsize." I laughed. Once. Sharp and humorless. "No, I am not looking to downsize, and the situation is not amicable." Dana held up her hands slightly. "Of course, I'm just here on a courtesy call. If I've misunderstood, you've been lied to." She looked uncomfortable. "I see." I stepped forward, my voice calm but unshakable. "This house belongs to me. Fully. Legally. The title is clean, the deed is current, and there are no co-owners or pending sales. I have no interest in selling. I suggest you make a note of that in your files." Dana nodded quickly, already backing down the steps. "Understood. I apologize. I won't bother you again." I watched her walk briskly back to her car, tap something on her tablet, and drive away. I closed the door slowly and leaned against it, breathing. They were still trying. Even now, after the confrontation, the silence, the documents, the locks, Abigail was still telling stories, still assuming that the right narrative could bend the truth into something more useful. This wasn't just entitlement. It was strategy. I called Mr. Lewiston again, told him everything. "She's fishing," he said. "Seeing if she can build a case around informal tenancy, maybe, or just hoping you'll back down and sell." "She didn't live here," I said. "Not officially, not legally. But long enough to try and claim otherwise," he warned. "We'll document today's visit. I'll draft a letter. If she reaches out again, directly or through a third party, we'll respond formally. Thank you." After the call, I stood in the kitchen for a long time, unsure what I felt. Not quite anger, not surprise either. It was something colder. Not fear, not anymore, but recognition. They weren't going to let this go. Greg had always been practical. Abigail, emotional. But together they made a dangerous pair, because Greg didn't need to believe he was right, just profitable. And Abigail didn't need facts, only feelings. Now I was neither profitable nor pliable. I was in their way. That afternoon, I called Karen L. from the HOA. Figured it was time I met the neighbors before someone else introduced me for their own purposes. She picked up on the second ring. "Karen, this is Martha Grayson from 108. I got your welcome letter." "Oh, Mrs. Grayson, yes. We're so happy to have you in the neighborhood. Are you settling in all right?" "I am," I said. "But I'd love to get to know the community." "Well, you're in luck. Tomorrow night is porch circle, very informal. Lawn chairs, lemonade, sometimes wine if Barbara gets her way." Sounds perfect. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. Connection, maybe. Or insulation. A reminder that my world didn't end at the edge of my family's approval. When I arrived the next evening, there were already 6 or 7 women gathered around Karen's front lawn, folding chairs in a loose semicircle, a picture of something sweating on a side table, bowls of snacks, laughter in the air that wasn't forced. They welcomed me easily, not with curiosity but familiarity, as if they already understood the kind of silence women like me carried. One of them, a tall woman named Rosa, said quietly over her cup, "You're the one who bought the lake cottage, right?" "Yes." "Heard your daughter made a mess." I didn't answer. She smiled. "Don't worry. Half of us have one just like her." The circle chuckled. I sipped my lemonade and smiled back. Maybe I didn't need to explain anything. Maybe I wasn't alone after all. The next morning, the letter came. No envelope. Just a folded piece of thick cream paper tucked into my mailbox as if it had every right to be there. No stamp, no postmark. Just Abigail's handwriting across the top in that careful, round style she learned in 3rd grade. "Mom." I stared at it for a moment on the porch, sun warming my face, birdsong in the distance. And still, the weight of those 3 letters hit like a rock. Inside, I unfolded the paper and read it standing by the kitchen counter. I didn't sit. I don't know why. "Mom, I don't understand how we got here. I really don't. I thought we had something unspoken between us, a kind of trust, a rhythm. We've always been close. I know I'm not perfect, and Greg isn't either, but we've built a life that includes you, that needed you. When you bought the lake house, I thought it was a gift to all of us, a fresh start. I pictured the kids playing in the yard, you having tea on the porch, family dinners every weekend. You belonged with us. I didn't think you'd want to be alone. Instead, you pushed us away. You changed the locks. You made it legal, as if we were criminals." That hurt, Mom. Deeply. Greg is angry. The kids are confused. I'm just sad. I hope someday you can look past all this and remember how much we love you, how much we need you. But until then, we'll give you space. Love, Abigail. I set the letter down without folding it, and I waited. Waited for that old guilt to rise, the tug in my chest that always pulled me back toward her, toward the silence, the apologies, the surrender. But it didn't come. Not this time. Because I saw it for what it was. Not an apology. Not an acknowledgement. Not even an attempt at repair. It was another performance. A subtle rewrite of the story, where she cast herself as the wounded daughter, and I, the distant mother, the cold keeper of keys and deeds. We've always been close. Close? No, not in a long time. I was convenient, available, useful, but not seen, not respected. I didn't think you'd want to be alone. That one stung, because it was true. For a long time, I didn't want to be. I let them fill the silence in my life, not because I needed their noise, but because I was afraid of my own quiet. But now I'd heard it. And it was beautiful. I left the letter on the counter and went outside, The lake shimmered in the late morning light. Ducks glided along the water. A man I'd seen before walked by with his dog and gave me a polite wave. I returned it. That afternoon, Rosa called. "You busy?" she asked. "No," I said. "Good. Karen's out front and we're trying to fix her terrible hedge situation. She thinks it's hydrangea, but I swear it's just overgrown guilt." I laughed. "I'll be right there." For the next 2 hours, I trimmed, clipped, and raked beside women I'd barely known a week ago. We talked about tomato plants and HOA meetings, not court filings or family betrayal. It felt like slipping into a new version of myself, one where the only thing people expected from me was to show up, laugh, and maybe bring a good pie. That evening, I opened the letter again, not to reread it, but to respond. On a fresh sheet of paper, I wrote, "Abigail, what you call unspoken trust, I now see was silent expectation, that I would always agree, always give, always fold. You may have imagined that this house was a gift for all of us, but it was not. It was a gift for me. After a life of putting others first, I wanted something of my own. I needed it. I did not push you away. You broke in. You moved in without asking. You made choices, and I responded to them. You may not like the response, but it was mine to give. I am not sad. I am free, and I will not give that up. Not even for love that comes with strings. Take care of the children. Teach them what boundaries look like. I didn't teach you soon enough. Martha, I didn't send it. I didn't need to. I folded it once, placed it in the same drawer as her first letter, and closed it. That would be the last letter between us, even if I was the only one to write both. The next day, I bought new towels, rearranged the guest room, and finally hung the wind chimes I found at the Sunday market. They sounded like glass laughter when the wind picked up. Bright, light, and unburdened. Just like I intended to be. The house stayed quiet for the next few days. No letters, no calls, no unexpected visits. Just the clean, steady rhythm of a life finally lived on my own terms. I woke when I pleased, watered the potted herbs I'd planted outside the kitchen window, took long walks by the lake, made soup that lasted 3 days and read until midnight if I felt like it. I even started a journal. Nothing fancy, just a lined notebook with a soft green cover. At the top of the first page, I wrote, "What is mine?" And beneath it, this house, this peace, this air, this day, this self. I didn't know what kind of woman kept a journal at 78, but I suppose the answer is one who finally has time to hear herself think. Still, peace doesn't last forever, not when your past refuses to let you go. It was a Thursday. I remember because it was the same day Rosa and I were supposed to go to a local church rummage sale when the doorbell rang again. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I had no reason to think it was trouble. Until I opened the door and saw a man in a black suit standing there, briefcase in hand. He looked like a banker. Or a man who wanted you to believe he was one. "Ms. Grayson?" he asked, already flipping open a document. "Yes?" "I'm Marcus Levin, legal counsel representing Gregory and Abigail Rhodes. May I have a moment?" I didn't step aside. "You may not." His expression didn't change. "I'm here to deliver this," he said, holding out a manila envelope. "It's a formal request to begin arbitration over property use and family access." I stared at him. "Access?" "They're asking for legal consideration regarding long-term occupancy and emotional investment in the home," he said smoothly. "Ms. Rhodes claims the property was presented to them as a shared family home, and—" "No," I said flatly. "I understand this is upsetting." You don't understand anything. I took the envelope, but didn't open it. Not yet. I have nothing more to say to you, I added. He gave a shallow nod. You're within your rights to seek counsel. A response will be expected within 14 days. I closed the door before he could finish. For a moment, I stood in the entryway, envelope in hand, breathing. Then I walked it straight to the kitchen table, set it down, and called Mr. Lewiston. He answered on the second ring. I told him everything, calmly, like I was reading from a list. When I finished, he didn't speak right away. Then, well, they're getting desperate. Do they have a case? No, not legally. But it's not about winning. It's about wearing you down, making enough noise that you'll cave. Mediation gives them a platform to present emotional harm. It's often used in divorce settlements, not inheritance theft. I want to respond, not just shut it down. I want to send a message. I'll draft something by tomorrow, he said, clear, final, and sharp. I thanked him and hung up. Only then did I open the envelope. It was 8 pages long, dressed up in polite phrases like familial bonds and relational equity, the kind of words that try to paint theft in watercolor. One line stuck with me. My client asserts that they were led to believe this property was intended for shared family life, and that their abrupt removal caused undue stress, particularly for the minor children. I laughed out loud, not because it was funny, because it was tired, predictable. Abigail hadn't gotten what she wanted, and now she wanted it through legal theater. Well, she would have to find another stage. That night, I went to Rosa's and told her everything. Not in detail, just enough. She didn't say much, just poured 2 glasses of wine and handed me a slice of something sweet she'd baked. They think you're alone, she said finally. That's what people like that always think. That once they isolate you, they can control the story. I said softly, for a long time. She looked at me, and her eyes were kind, but firm. You're not now. Later, as I walked home under the soft yellow of porch lights and the whirring of cicadas, I thought about what she'd said. She was right. I wasn't alone. And I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever again. The letter arrived the next morning. Not from Abigail. Not from her lawyer. From mine. Lewiston's envelope was thick, heavy, not with paperwork, but with clarity. Inside was the official response to their petition for arbitration, along with a drafted cease and desist, just in case they tried to escalate further. I read it at the kitchen table, tea cooling beside me. The respondent, Ms. Martha Grayson, denies all claims of informal co-ownership or implied invitation for permanent residency. All legal documents confirm exclusive ownership. Any further suggestion to the contrary will be treated as harassment. It was clinical, sharp, unapologetic. I approved every word. The house was quiet, the lake still. The morning sun filtered through the curtains and laid soft patterns across the floor. I hadn't spoken to Abigail in weeks, hadn't seen my grandchildren. And yes, it ached. Of course it did. But not as much as the thought of going back. Because that's what she wanted. Not reconciliation. Not understanding. She wanted the terms of my love to be silence. And I was done loving like that. I sealed the letter, hand-delivered it to Lewiston's office, then took myself out for lunch. A small Italian cafe with homemade pasta and tablecloths that reminded me of the ones I used to sew in the summers when Harold worked overtime. The waiter asked if I wanted a table for 2. No, I said. Just me. He smiled. Even better. When I came home that afternoon, there was a package on the porch. Brown paper, no return address. I brought it inside cautiously, slid it open with a paring knife. Inside, a scrapbook. At first I didn't understand. Then I saw the note, scrawled in Abigail's handwriting, though shakier than usual. From the kids, they wanted you to have something. I didn't help them with it. I opened the book. Construction paper pages, stickers, photos of birthday cakes, school concerts, beach trips, little drawings and captions in blocky handwriting. Grandma makes the best toast. Grandma helped me spell chrysanthemum. Grandma let me cry when I was scared to sleep alone. I turned each page slowly, like turning back time. Near the end, one page held just 2 sentences, written in pencil. "We miss you. Are you mad forever?" I closed the book, and I cried. Not loudly, not messily, but with the kind of quiet sorrow that feels like pulling up something buried too long. I didn't regret protecting myself, but I regretted that they had to be caught in the crossfire. Children don't know where the lines are. They only feel the cold when the door gets closed. That night, I wrote a letter, not to Abigail, to the children. Dear Ellie and Max, thank you for the scrapbook. It's the most beautiful thing I've held in years. I read every page. I remember every moment. I'm not mad at you. I never was. Sometimes grown-ups get lost in things that aren't your fault. They forget how to talk to each other. They make mistakes. I've made many. But loving you isn't one of them. This house is quiet, but not sad. I think you'd like it. I planted herbs and made new curtains. The lake is just as pretty as you remember. I'm not ready for visits yet. Not until things settle. But you can always write to me. Anytime. I'll always write back. Love, Grandma. I mailed it the next morning, hand-addressed, with 2 stamps just in case. I didn't trust Abigail not to intercept it, but I had to try. That afternoon, Rosa and I visited the garden center. I bought pots. Soil. A wind spinner shaped like a heron. It made her laugh. "Careful," she said. "Next thing you know, you'll be putting flamingos on the lawn." "Never," I said. "Even I have limits." We laughed. We planted. And that night, for the first time in a long time, I didn't dream about courtrooms or lawyers or closed doors. I dreamed of the lake, the porch, my grandchildren's voices, soft in the distance, and the feeling of my own name, spoken only by me, without apology. It wasn't the kind of return you'd expect. No knock, no letter, no confrontation, just a voicemail. I didn't even hear the phone ring. I found it the next morning while checking weather updates. A notification blinking quietly. One new message. I tapped it. Her voice, measured, brittle, trying too hard not to sound rehearsed. "Hi, Mom. I just wanted you to know we received your letter to the kids." Max read it aloud at the table. Ellie cried. Greg didn't say much. "They're asking questions I can't answer." Pause. "I know things are broken. I don't know how to fix them anymore. Maybe it's not my place to ask, but if you ever want to talk, we're here." Click. No demands, no guilt, no threats of mediation, just words. Still, I didn't call back. Not because I was angry, because I was tired. Tired of being pulled into her world before I'd rebuilt my own. Tired of rushing to patch holes she refused to stop making. Instead, I sat on the porch and watched the sky change. September was arriving gently, warm enough in the afternoon, but the mornings hinted at chill. I wrapped myself in a shawl I hadn't worn since Harold passed. Soft gray wool, a gift from my sister May. She used to say, "Some things aren't for warmth. They're for remembering you're still here." Rosa came by later that afternoon. She didn't ask questions, just brought cookies and a catalog for winter bulbs. We sat under the fig tree. The leaves had started to yellow at the tips. "You're quieter today," she said. "My daughter left a message." "She apologizing yet?" "Not exactly." She bit into a cookie. "That figures." I smiled, but it didn't quite reach my chest. "I don't know if I even want to go backward," I admitted. "It's like she wants to skip over everything, pretend it was all a misunderstanding. But I remember every detail. I remember how they looked at me like a problem to manage." Rosa nodded. "That's the thing with people like that. They're always waiting for your memory to get tired." I looked over at her. "Mine's not." "Good," she said. "Hold on to that." That evening, I made soup again. The same one I used to cook when Abigail was little. Lentils, carrots, thyme. Simple, clean. I poured myself a bowl, sat down, and wrote a second letter. Not for the children this time. For me. "Dear Martha, you did the right thing. You waited a lifetime to stop waiting. You stood up when you could have disappeared. You chose the harder road, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. They don't know the strength it took, but you do. You don't owe them softness when they bring you stones. You don't owe them access to a life they tried to rewrite without you. You are not cruel. You are not cold. You are a woman who finally chose herself. And that is sacred. Stay steady. Love, Martha." I folded the letter, placed it in the back of my journal. That night, I took a slow walk down to the dock behind the house. The moon was low, casting silver streaks across the water. The wind was cool, but not bitter. And for the first time, I said his name aloud. Harold. Just that. No story. No monologue. No grief too heavy for one woman's throat. Just his name. As if to say, I'm still here, and I'm still mine. It's strange what stays with you. A voice. A gesture. The sound a door makes when it closes behind someone who doesn't turn around. But just as strange is what leaves you. Quietly. Like a fever breaking. You wake up, and the ache is gone. You don't notice until you go looking for it and realize there's only space where pain used to live. That's how it felt by the second week of September. I was no longer waking up angry, no longer composing retorts in my head or rehearsing courtroom speeches that would never be heard. I wasn't waiting for letters or expecting Greg to come storming up the walkway again. And when I walked by the drawer with Abigail's letters inside, I didn't stop anymore. There were still echoes, but they were faint. The real surprise was what filled their place. There was a woman named Eleanor, Ellie for short like my granddaughter, who lived 4 houses down. She was 82, wore wide-brimmed hats, and had once been a ballroom dancer. We met at Karen's porch circle and ended up having coffee one morning. She told me about her arthritis. I told her about the legal letter. We both laughed in that brittle, shared way women do when they've seen too much to be startled anymore. "You know what the difference is between surviving and living?" she asked, sipping something too strong for my taste. "Furniture. If you sit in your own chair, in your own room, and nobody dares tell you where to put your feet, you're living." I nodded. "I gave my daughter our old dining set when she got married," she added. "She never even said thank you, just told me how it didn't match the paint. You believe that?" "Yes," I said. "I do." It wasn't bitterness what we shared. It was accounting. Women like us kept ledgers in our hearts, not of money, but of effort. What we gave, what they took, what came back, and what didn't. Later that day, I got another letter. Not from Abigail, but from Ellie, the younger one. Real mail this time. A small envelope with a sticker in the corner. A smiling owl. Inside, a card drawn in marker. Hi, Grandma. We miss you. My teacher said your name is beautiful. I hope you are warm. Love, Ellie. That's all. But I held it for a long time. Not because it reopened a wound, but because it gave me something else. Proof that love doesn't vanish just because its delivery route gets changed. I wrote her back that same evening, kept it light, told her about the wind chimes, the lake ducks, how one had started waddling too close to the porch, and I was considering naming it. If I do, I wrote, I'll let you pick the name. I didn't write to Abigail. I didn't mention Greg. I wasn't ready, and I wasn't sure I ever would be. That weekend, Rosa invited me to a community fair at the park. There were booths and raffles and pie contests, all the kinds of things that used to make me feel invisible when I was standing behind Abigail and the kids, holding bags and wiping crumbs from little faces. This time, I stood alone. Someone handed me a flyer for a watercolor class. Someone else complimented my scarf. At one point, a younger woman came up to me and said, "Are you the one with the lake house?" I heard what happened. I felt the tension rise, just for a moment, waiting for judgment. But she smiled. "Good for you," she said, seriously, and then walked away. I wanted to cry, but didn't. I just stood there, holding a slice of apple pie, letting the warmth of ordinary kindness settle into my skin like sun. Later that night, I sat by the window and thought about the house again. Not its walls or furniture, but the idea of it. What it had become. It was no longer a symbol of what I'd reclaimed. It was just my home. That's what healing looks like sometimes. Not fireworks, not forgiveness shouted across a lawn. Just a woman alone, content with her evening, full from pie, and soft with the glow of being left alone. On purpose, and for the better. It was raining when Abigail finally came back. Not a storm, just a soft, steady drizzle that made the lake look like it was breathing. I was trimming dead leaves from my potted thyme when I saw the car pull up. Same SUV, same dent on the back fender. Only this time, she was alone. No children, no Greg. She didn't get out right away, just sat there, hands on the wheel, engine idling like she hadn't decided yet whether she was staying or just making a point. I could have gone inside. Closed the door. Pretended not to see. But I didn't. I dried my hands on a dish towel, walked down the steps, and stood on the porch, waiting. Eventually, she opened the door and stepped into the rain. No umbrella. Just a cardigan too thin for the weather, and that old habit of looking like she had it all under control when it was clear she didn't. We stood there, yards apart, in the soft quiet of early evening, the lake behind me and her car behind her. "You're not going to invite me in?" she asked. "No." She nodded. Figured. Another pause. "I don't want to fight," she said. "Good." "I'm not interested in repeating the last 20 years. She winced, just slightly. "You think that's all it's been? Taking in silence?" I didn't answer. She already knew. "I didn't plan to hurt you," she said after a while. I thought it would be easier, for all of us." "You thought it would be easier if I didn't have a say," I said. "That's not the same thing." She looked down at her shoes, soaked through now. "I brought something," she said, reaching into her coat pocket. A small envelope, sealed. Handed it to me like it weighed nothing. I didn't open it, just held it in my palm. "It's not a letter," she added quickly. Just a list of everything, all the money, all the things you gave us over the years. I wanted you to know I finally counted. That surprised me. I looked at her, not softened, but seen, maybe. For the first time without the filter of being her mother. She looked older, tired, like someone who'd finally lost control of the story and didn't know how to live outside the lines. I didn't come here to win, she said. I know I already lost. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to understand. I nodded once. That's a start, but understanding isn't the same as changing. I know. And knowing isn't the same as doing. She exhaled, her voice lower now. The kids ask about you. I write to them. I know. Max keeps your notes in his drawer. Ellie reads them to her stuffed animals. That almost broke something in me. But I held steady. I won't be part of your household again, Abigail, I said. I won't be your safety net. I'm not your second income, or your emergency exit, or your plan B. I understand. And I don't owe you forgiveness just because you finally noticed the cost. I know. She looked up then. And for once, I believed her. We stood there for another minute, just listening to the rain. No shouting. No apology that changed everything. No dramatic hug. Just the wet truth of two women who had loved each other badly, and maybe still did, in some quiet, unfixable way. I should go, she said. You should. She walked back to the car, opened the door, and paused. I was wrong, she said over her shoulder. Not just about the house. About you. I thought you'd always be waiting. I was, I said. Until I wasn't. Then she left. I didn't cry. I went inside, boiled water, made myself a cup of tea. I sat by the window and opened the envelope. Inside was a typed list, detailed, line by line. 2007, private school tuition, $11,280, 2012. Car down payment, $3,500, 2015. Emergency dental, $940, 2020. Mortgage bridge loan, $15,000, on and on. Over 30 items. At the bottom, one line, handwritten. This is what I took. I can't give it back. But I can stop asking for more. I folded the list and put it in the same drawer as the scrapbook, the kids' notes, the unsent letters. Not because I needed to forgive her, but because I didn't need to prove anything anymore. My silence wasn't currency now. It was peace. You learn to live with the quiet. At first, it stings, like you've turned down the volume on a life you used to keep loud out of habit. You miss the background noise, the constant needs, the clattering demands disguised as love, the voices filling space so you don't have to hear your own. But after a while, the quiet becomes something else entirely. It becomes clarity. I woke up the morning after Abigail's visit and didn't feel hollow. I didn't wait for the phone to ring, didn't listen for her car. I made tea, opened the windows, and breathed in the damp scent of the lake after rain. The air had changed, or maybe I had. The days that followed were slow but full. I reorganized the pantry, planted fall crocuses, started reading a mystery novel I found at the church sale. Something with a nosy librarian and too many cats. Nothing urgent, nothing borrowed. Ellie, the older one, invited me to a quilting circle. I hadn't sewn in years. Not since the machine broke and Abigail borrowed the replacement money for a new dishwasher. But my hands remembered. We sat in a semicircle on folding chairs, women of all kinds, chatting over cups of coffee and fabric scraps. Someone said, I just need a corner of the world where nobody needs me to fix them. And everyone nodded. That night, I walked by the lake with Rosa. We didn't talk much, just the sound of gravel under our shoes and the soft slap of water against the dock. "You look lighter," she said. "I feel it." "What changed?" I paused. I stopped waiting to be heard and started listening to myself instead. She smiled. "That's a hard turn to make." "Yes," I said, "but it's mine." Back at the house, I sat on the porch until the stars came out. I thought about the letter Abigail left me, about the years that could never be rewritten, the thousands of tiny ways I disappeared inside my own giving. There wouldn't be a reunion, no perfect resolution, no photos on the mantle next to holiday cards. But there was something better. The quiet certainty that I had finally stepped out of the role they'd written for me. I wasn't the grandmother on standby. I wasn't the mother as wallet. I wasn't the last resort housing solution, the backup plan, the storage unit for other people's crises. I was Martha Grayson, and I was still here. 2 days later, I got a letter. Not from Abigail this time, but from Max. Neatly written in blue pen, the kind they make you use in school. "Hi, Grandma. I got a B+ on my book report. You would have liked the story. It had pirates, but also feelings. Thank you for writing to us. I read your letter twice. Mom says maybe we can visit in the spring. Is that okay?" I wrote back that evening. "Dear Max, a B+ is excellent, especially on pirates and feelings. You must be braver than I was at your age. I used to hide under the covers if a story got too emotional. Thank you for writing to me. Spring sounds lovely. Let's say yes for now. A short visit. Just you and Ellie, if it works. Bring stories. I'll bring cookies. Love, Grandma." It wasn't forgiveness. It was a beginning. A new kind. One with rules. The next day, I stopped by the hardware store and bought a brass nameplate. I'd seen one on Rose's gate and liked the idea. Something small but clear. The man behind the counter said, "What would you like it to say?" I thought for a moment, then smiled. "Martha Grayson, owner." He raised an eyebrow. "Not just your name?" "No," I said. "I want the rest too." When it was ready, I screwed it into the frame beside the front door, just above the house number. It caught the morning light like a quiet flare. Not a warning, not a dare. Just a fact. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the wind picked up, I made one last change. I unlocked the drawer in my bedroom, the one with all the old receipts, the gilt-lined ledgers, the faded snapshots of years I couldn't get back. I took them out. I sat on the floor and read them one by one. Then I lit a small fire in the fireplace and fed them to the flame, not angrily, not as revenge, but as release. Each one curled, blackened, turned to ash, and with each piece, I felt something inside me loosen, not fall apart, but rearrange. I watched until the last edge turned orange and folded in on itself. Then I sat back, wrapped in a blanket, and let the quiet settle again. It no longer felt like absence. It felt like presence. Mine. It's been 6 months now. The lake looks different in spring, fuller somehow. The air carries that early warmth that hasn't committed to staying, and the trees lean out over the water like women testing the edge of a dance floor. Everything is softer, but nothing is uncertain. I wake early, not from worry, but from habit. The kind of waking that comes with knowing your day belongs to you and no one else. The porch chair creaks a little now. I like it that way. It reminds me that even quiet things still have a voice. Max and Ellie came to visit last weekend. Abigail didn't come with them. She dropped them off and left without coming up the path. Just a slow wave from the window. I didn't wave back. I wasn't being cruel. I was being honest. The children ran up the steps like they remembered every board. Ellie brought a notebook filled with facts about owls. Max had 2 books, and a rock he was sure was part of a meteorite. We baked cookies, walked the lake path, and played cards on the porch. At night, I tucked them into the guest beds, read aloud until one of them snored softly. I stayed in the doorway longer than I meant to. The next morning, Ellie looked up at me over toast and said, "You don't look sad anymore." And I didn't. Before they left, Max hugged me tightly and whispered, "I'm glad you didn't move." Me too. Abigail didn't come up to the door even then. I handed her the overnight bag, said nothing. She looked at me, not expecting an invitation, but hoping maybe for a different version of me to appear. I didn't. And that was love too. The kind that keeps its shape. The kind that says, "I will not disappear, even for you." After they drove off, I sat on the porch with my tea and looked out across the water. The ducks were back. The chimes caught a breeze and clinked like quiet laughter. The nameplate beside the door had dulled a little, weather-touched now, but still clear. Martha Grayson. Owner. I smiled. The other women, Rosa, Ellie, and the others, stopped by later that week. They brought pie and advice about keeping deer out of the garden. We sat in a circle. No big confessions, no tears. Just the ease of knowing none of us had anything to prove anymore. That's what aging can be, if you let it. Not vanishing, not shrinking, but becoming sharp and exact. Like a lighthouse, or a good pair of scissors. The house, too, has settled. It no longer feels like a prize won. It feels like an extension of me. Like I don't just live here. I exist here. Fully. Without apology. And that's the part no one teaches you. That healing isn't loud. It doesn't come with music or applause. Sometimes it looks like baking bread on a Tuesday morning, or sitting by yourself without feeling lonely, or saying no, and meaning it. Sometimes I walk through the rooms just to feel how solid the floor is under my feet. I touch the walls and say, "This is mine." Not because I need to own things, but because for so long I didn't even own myself. But I do now. Every word, every silence, every door I choose to open or leave shut. Abigail hasn't asked to come in again, and I haven't offered. Maybe someday the space between us will become something gentler. Maybe not. But either way, I'll still be here, alive, exact, and finally, fully mine. If this story found you, I hope it reminded you. It's never too late to take your life back. Not through noise, not through revenge, but through clarity, dignity, and the kind of strength that speaks only once and never again. If you know someone who needs to hear this, share it. And if you've come this far, thank you. My story is quiet, but I hope it stayed with you. Martha.